Welcome back to another episode of That's Business. Today's guest, Tara Sievers-Hunt, inhabited many roles in her 20 years as an opera singer, music director, educational psychologist, narrative researcher, and college professor. Today, she coaches professionals in presence and communication through the Restorying Studio and expanding her creative practice as a freelance playwright and narrativist. Tara, this is a long time coming. I may have squealed when I saw you scheduled.
I'm so excited.
Thank you for coming on the podcast. But
Thank you for
let's
having
throw
me.
it back because you have your PhD. You are just, I tell you all the time, you're the friend I want to be when I grow up, where you just are this beautiful onion of just like every layer and something new and some badass story that is you. So throwing it back, what did we want to be when we grew up? Were we always a theater kid, or talk us through your childhood if you feel comfortable?
I wasn't a theater kid, which is so strange.
Okay.
I think the easiest way to describe it is I had a group of stuffed animals. I grew up in a pretty rural part of just north of Rochester. And I had this group of stuffed animals that I would carry around with me. And they were alternatively my students and my audience. And so that's how it kind of led to I got into education and I got in front of people. But I started with classical music. I started off as a pianist, started training when I was 4. And then I joined church choir and then I was in band in school. So it was really music, straight conservatory in front of people. And then when I went to university and started training and singing opera, that's when I started to get on stage. So I was always very into stories. I was reading, I was writing, I loved films. But yeah, being on stage really didn't start for me until I was in college.
And what were those early experiences like? I forget the statistic, but it's some wild statistic of that's like the 5th most common fear is public speaking or being in front of people for the world or something like that. Like, that's a big deal. So how old were you?
I loved being in front of people. I wasn't, I was a little more subdued. I wasn't like, look at me, in class, I was the good student. But I remember I would always try and write plays or do little shows and get my grandparents to play a role, and they'd mess up and I'd cry and run away because they'd screwed up my show. The anxiety that comes in really came as I started to be trained in there's a right way to play this piece, to sing this song, to deliver this speech. So when I was just being me, I loved it and I felt very comfortable. It wasn't until I started the training and the don't mess this up, we're judging you kind of came into my ear. And that's when I started to come into, what we refer to as stage fright and needing to manage that along the way.
And it's so interesting. And now, looking back at this beautiful 20-year career you've had, do you ever get nervous, or is it just like second nature to you whenever you're in front of a group of people or anything like that?
With the mentorship I've done, because I've worked with so many young people who had big dreams of going to Broadway or, being a famous singer. And so I had to do a lot of research into what is performance anxiety. And it was interesting to do that research because then you can reflect on your own experience and make connections between the two. And what I kept finding and what I realized in myself is you need that energy. You need that little bit of getting ready to do a thing. And biologically, interestingly, there's no difference physiologically between being excited and being anxious. It's more of the mental. So you still get, the heart starts to race and the palms get a little sweaty and all of those things. But it's the mindset that we have of, okay, I'm going to get on this roller coaster and it's going to be a ride, or I'm going to get on this roller coaster and it's going to and crash and burn and my life is over. It's not as easy as I make it sound, but it really starts with the things we're telling ourselves inside about what's going to happen when we get up there. So as I was dealing with it and helping other people deal with it, I need to get into that. Okay, here we go, like the big game. I was also an athlete growing up. So you don't want to get on the court flat. You don't want to get on the stage flat. That's when you start to make mistakes. You need that adrenaline.
And that's a great way to relate the two because it is the same. As a sports fan, I never did theater or anything, or I was the sports kid growing up, but had the creative outlets, and it is the same feelings. So it's very interesting how that works.
Yeah.
Now, walk us through because I know I'm going to get this question, what is a narrativist? What is this phrase? Some people I remember when I met you, I was like, what is that shiny term? So walk us through what that is.
So I'll tell you the longer story of how I came into it, but narrativists to me deal with narrative. I've kind of repurposed the term from another place. But we have stories, and stories we tell. We all know what stories are. Narratives are stories with power. They're a story or a collection of stories that we tell ourselves that inform us about what is truth, what is identity, what's going to happen when I step on stage. So if I mess up a single word in my song, then I've failed. If that's a narrative that I tell myself, that's a lot of pressure, right? If I get up and I tell myself the narrative, yeah, I've really worked on this German, I'm going to sing it as cleanly as possible. But if I flip some words, this audience doesn't speak German, it will be okay. I can make German-like sounds until I get back into the groove. That's a different narrative. So I deal with the narratives that people tell ourselves, we tell other people to help them get to know us, the way that we record our personal history and recall it. I came into this term because came into performing. I was very serious about that. And then I realized it just wasn't the lifestyle for me. I have some pretty successful, famous friends, and their lifestyle is amazing. They're constantly traveling and they're always on. And it didn't make me happy the way I thought it would. So I always performed, but I kind of brought myself back into teaching. I was a professor at Marigrove College down in Detroit, and Marigrove unfortunately declared exigency, which is bankruptcy, and closed around 2018. And all of a sudden, I was in the middle of my PhD, and I was no longer going to be a professor. My father passed away. Like all of these things happened, and I committed myself to, I've got to finish the PhD. But it was hard because the study I was doing was going to be a case study talking to recent graduates of our music program and how they came into a professional identity of musicianhood. And all of a sudden, my dissertation had no purpose because the whole purpose of the case study was to inform the new curriculum we had written. And there was no more curriculum, there was no more school. So I went to my advisor, and my advisor said, "Just finish it. What can you do?" And I said, "The only thing I really can do is make art. I can tell the stories of these individuals and see if I can make sense of it." And so, very long story short, it became a research-based play. So all of their interview words became monologues, and there were like storytelling things that I did that were collaborative, and there was a mixtape in the middle of it of all the songs they talked about. And so I told the stories of what they were doing, and that is through what we call narrative inquiry, where you are looking at the narratives that people are sharing of their journey. And so that's kind of how I came along into narrative is something important to me. It's something I see and I'm very passionate about. So now I'm building it into something new.
Remind me if I'm correct. Is this the PhD, the dissertation that Lucia had set when making fun of you for, of it being, what, 250 pages or something crazy?
So Luciana's is 200 and some pages. Mine ended up being 600, which broke the record
That's
at
what it
Oakland
was.
University. But you have to understand. So it's it's a dissertation itself, which has 3 chapters of methodology, and it's kind of the manifesto of how I wrote the play, and it's the play itself. So it's not fair to compare it to a lot of other things. But yeah, I kind of had fun writing, and thank you to my chair and my committee for being so patient with all the things that I felt called to say.
Yes, Tara. A little backstory. Tara had this beautiful dinner party for her friend that came in from North Carolina, and she was throwing her right under the table of, yeah, you should be a playwright because you have such good writing. So, and that was the story she told. But I was like, 600 pages. That's a hefty book. Like, let alone a dissertation.
And it's only one side of the page, if that
It's
makes
still
it
a lot. It's still very
better.
impressive. It is. So wrapping this all with this, connotation of how people present themselves. And something I really admire about you is when we first met, you are so eloquent with how you speak. And if my ADHD brain could work correctly, I would love to sound like you all the time. But you create such a space for people to be themselves. And I stole your term of shiny people because it's
Sure.
so freaking true. But How has your, worldly experiences and what you've done kind of made this safe space that you create for clients you work with? Students you've worked with, professionals. How did that come to be in the essence of who you are today?
That started with my training and teaching. So there's two terms. So behaviorist is an approach to education, and constructivist is an approach to education. I came up through a behaviorist model of sit here, memorize this, fill your little empty vessel brain, and regurgitate it back perfectly. Congratulations, you get a gold star, and now you're educated. So it was really the powers that be determining what was valuable to know, and here's how you should know it and demonstrate that you know it, and how you apply it out of this class. Maybe you'll figure it out. I did have a few teachers along the way, but not many. When I came into education, constructivism is the idea that we construct knowledge, that with our prior experiences and our values and our beliefs and our interests, we take all of this information that's coming at us and we put it together in very unique ways. And so instead of I'm going to fill your empty vessel head with how you, so for example, my new business is working as a presence and communication coach. So instead of me saying, oh, well, to improve your speaking, you must do A, B, and C. Here's all the quick tips and tricks that work for everybody. It starts with a conversation of what are you running into problems with? What would you like to see happen? And then we get into what you need, and then we start to figure out what maybe skills are lacking, maybe confidence is lacking, maybe one of those narratives that you're telling yourself, doomsday narratives are in your head. There was a really interesting young lady that I worked with a couple months ago. And when I was speaking to her, she was just kind of speaking here. It was very into herself. She was not commanding the room. And I said, what is your number one goal that you want with an audience? She said, I want to be inviting. I want to invite them in because I see these people just kind of yelling at the audience. So I invite them in. I said, that's really beautiful. Let's take that and just kind of turn the narrative a little bit. So instead of inviting them into yourself, which is kind of making it quieter, let's invite them to gather. Let's invite them to receive. And she thought about it for a moment, and all of a sudden she just opened up and her voice rang across the room. Because that was her goal. I didn't challenge her goal. We just made a slight adjustment, and all of a sudden the voice went where it needed to go. And this was a high school student.
That's a beautiful story.
And it's really magical to see that happen because I get to be a conduit between this is what I want, but this is what is actually happening outside of me. How do we make those align a little better?
Well, and that's so much better than the here's 5 tips to improve your public speaking, because oftentimes I think I'm a pretty good public speaker. And when I always like to read things, learn new things, great. And I'm not saying I'm the best thing out there, but it's always, I'm like, okay, great. I do all those things. That's not helpful. So I love your approach of where do you want to be? Because even with that invitingness, you don't have to be the one that's, the center of attention, the one in every room, but how you can bring in the right people. So that's such a beautiful approach. So as you're with the Restoring Studio, what is your main focus? Or, you just talked about high school story. I know personally you've coached entrepreneurs and executives. So where's your kind of sweet spot of either the type of person you like to work with or background? What's that like for you?
I'm open to a wide range of people, but I would say what I'm really looking for are people who know that they can grow and want to improve and want to have a conversation about that. They're willing to get vulnerable. They're willing to be curious. They're willing to experiment. And that takes a lot, with the learning environments that a lot of us grow up in. We don't have that kind of exchange with a more knowledgeable other. We're ready to be told, and then we have the answer, we can do it. So I love people who are ready to be in a conversation. And the other part of it is I love working with clients who are passionate about something. They have words they need to share. They have a piece of art they've created they want to give to an audience. They've made a business. They've separated themselves from, the big corporations, and they're making a product or they're selling an idea that they just really feel deep in their soul that's their calling. And that's what they need to do. And that just puts the spark behind their words that I can't give you. If you don't believe in what you're saying, if you're not excited to share it and you're just you might be nervous. I'm not saying that you're not nervous about it, but it's like, but it has to be said. It has to be shared. Those are the two things I'm really looking for with people that I work with. And I'm happy to work with a 16-year-old who's in that space. And I'm happy to work with a 60-year-old who's in that space, who's, the executive and had the huge career, but still has never felt comfortable in front of people. And it's like, I'm 60, damn it. I should be able to get in front of people and like it for once. Yeah.
And that's a great age range too. I mean, I did not come into my public speaking. I actually just talked about on a podcast episode the other day until I really was forced to in college of being on the executive board for one of the student-run organizations. And I had to speak in front of people, but trial and error, and it really helps out, let alone starting at 16 or 14 and just coming to be. So that's awesome. I love that. Now, because I am so fascinated by people who can write plays, like being a playwright. I mean, where do you start? I mean, these may be some dumb questions, but like, how do you just sit down and do this? Like, this is crazy to me.
So I specifically am a research-based playwright, meaning I take stories that have existed. I do interviews with people like I did with my dissertation. There was a mixed media opera that I was part of where we took the stories of Pat, who was a photographer in Windsor, and Amelia, who was an opera singer in Windsor around the 1950s and 60s, took their words from conversations they had with friends and newspaper articles and told their story. Come From Away. If you've ever seen Come From Away, the musical, that's a research-based musical based on 9/11, where they interviewed the people, and it's really those characters, an amalgamation of those characters. I stumbled into playwriting. I was music directing musicals for a long time, and having to make decisions of, okay, how do we tell this story with this cast? And then I was asked to do the Pat and Amelia. I was asked to do a song cycle, a collection of songs about Pat. And we started to shop it around to people. And within that, she mentioned this friend Amelia, who was an opera singer. And whereas Pat chose not to pursue marriage and children so she could have a career, Amelia, even though she was so talented, chose to get married and had kids and eventually left performing full time, and how Pat was mad at her. And as we were shopping this around to people to get some funds for it, people kept asking about Amelia. And I started to research her, and I found out that she had the same position I did at Marygrove College in the 70s. And I said, okay, this is meant to be. So all of a sudden it's going to be an opera, and I'm writing the first act. And at the same time, around that time, Marygrove wanted to put on a musical, but the kids had so much life going on, they couldn't commit evenings for 3 months, and we really didn't have a lot of money to get the rights to anything. So I said, well, I'll write something. So I went to all the different sources of Cinderella, and I made a play called Cinderella Through the Kaleidoscope, which was just piecing all of these different parts. So movie scenes and operas. So it opened with a big grand ballet of the ball of Act 2. And then it went into Single Ladies Put a Ring on It. And then it went into
Amazing.
the Rodgers and Hammerstein, Why Would a Fella Choose a Girl Like Her? And I just fell in love with this idea of I can take all these things that I know and love about theater and take these real life lived stories or stories that we're so familiar with and bring them in a different way to shine a light onto it. So my projects kind of find me. It's really been exciting to consider, okay, I can devote more time to this now that I'm building my own schedule, my own life. I talked to you about this a little bit before, where I thought I had to find one thing that I did. I thought I had to take all of me and find the one path, the one title, which is kind of where I'm a narrativist. And everyone was like, great, what do you do? And I was like, everything. And so now I have 2 sets of business cards, and I'm going to have 2 websites. And so I've got the presence and communication coach, and this is taking all the skills I've honed and helping people. And that's my moneymaker. That is my business. And the playwriting, I would love to get paid for my writing. That would be great. But it gives me, having that side where I have the business side of me, it gives me the freedom to have the artist side of me without the pressure. I've talked to so many artists who think they are only a true artist if you're doing the art 100% of the time, and that's how you pay the bills. And that's not what the majority of artists' life are like. You have to have some other way to bring in money, either because it's just not paying you well or it's not consistent enough or whatever it is. So being an artist, there's no shame in having those two sides of you and having the thing that pays the bills and having the thing that is your calling and your heart and your expressive center. If you could eventually make that your full-time thing, amazing. But it doesn't make you less of an artist to have a different way that you're paying the bills. And, we have this question we ask people, what do you do for a living? And I've started to change that question, the response to that question, because I used to be like, how do I answer that? And I say, do you want to know how I make money or do you want to know my heart and my calling?
Ooh.
And people typically, well, yeah, you can tell me, but what? Tell me the second one. But then it's okay to share both, because you might be very impressive and say, well, I'm a lawyer, but maybe the calling, maybe every single minute that you have extra to give, you are going down to help stray animals and connecting young people with taking care of animals so that they can gain more skills and empathy and caregiving and gentleness.
It's so true to separate the two because favorite part of what I do is looking at people's experiences and seeing how it changes. And you'll love this. I have a client who's an automotive, so very technical project manager, and somehow stumbled on that she's in theater and has written a few plays herself, which is funny. You may know her, but and I was like, why are we not having this on the resume? Like, we need it on the resume, absolutely, because it's so interesting to find people that have that technical abilities, like you said, like your lawyer example, and then have a creative outlet. And you're not a failure if you're not making money from it. It's so many people just like do what you have to do to pay the bills, or the two business idea is just so genius. And I'm forever impressed that you could just like knock out a play, no problem. So
it's not that easy.
I know, right? Well, that was gonna follow-up question. How long does it typically take you? And I know it's not a one answer fits all, but how long does it take to write a play, or when do you know you're done? Because I feel like it could be like an artist where you're like, oh, just a little more highlighting there. Oh, wait, a little more there. And it's just never over.
Oh, there's several questions in what you just asked. So the play that I'm working on right now, and I have a big thing that I don't typically speak openly about things I'm currently working on. It just keeps the energy in. But
okay.
The play I'm working on right now, I received the spark for 10 years ago. And I started working on it and I went, no, I can't do this. And it came back around. And so now it's the right time for this to happen. The Cinderella, I had the idea and I wrote it in a month. But it wasn't very deep. It wasn't very deep research because I already knew Cinderella sources. I just found a few and I kind of cobbled. I knew the story of Cinderella. I made a little twist at the end where she doesn't go off with the prince, but decides to go to college. And then we had the fairy godfather come out with a packet of, you could go to Marygrove College, which was, marketing for a grant.
That's amazing.
So she handed him a number and said, well, call me maybe, because that was a big song at that time. Typically, the big heavy work for me is the research. So the play I'm working on right now, I'm doing a different methodological approach, which is how I will write the play. I'm reading all kinds of backstories. I have to read the main material. But with my work before, typically all that front end stuff takes a while. And then when it's ready and it's just ready to burst out of my head, it takes me a couple weeks and I just go put it and put it together. But people look at that and go, well, you wrote this in 3 weeks. I'm like, no, not really. There were months and months that it took before that came to be. But
and how do you keep yourself, motivated and have that positivity to keep going? And I feel anytime we get together, you tell me this idea and then it's like a week later and you execute on it. I'm just so fascinated by people like yourself, but how do you maintain that momentum and you just do the damn thing?
Yeah, I really came into a different process through work on the dissertation, and anyone who has done a dissertation, in between finishing the dissertation and realizing what I'm doing now, I worked for a really wonderful organization called Write the Damn Dissertation, where I helped coach women around the world to finish. And it's like you have this huge thing, and it seems like working on it for an hour a day, you're not going to get anywhere. But it's having that belief that this 10 minutes I have to give today, or an hour, or wow, I got a whole 3-hour shot. Just committing to doing it, the eat the frog thing, where if this is important to you, you get up and it's the first thing you touch. It's also knowing what parts of the day you're good for certain things. So my hard research thinking time is 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. I'm useless in the afternoon. That needs to be the mindless stuff where I'm going to appointments or I'm cleaning my house or I'm, answering emails or whatever. And then I get brilliant again about 11 o'clock at night to 3 a.m, which I cannot do very often. But if everything's synthesizing and coming together, that's my the cosmos opens and the muse enters the door and I go, okay, this is how it comes together. So it's a combination of, discipline, forgiveness. If you miss a day, that's okay, but try not to miss 2 in a row. Understand what's going on, what you have the capability for. And even though maybe you set a goal of, well, today's the day I'm going to do A, it's like, I don't have the capacity to do A today, but I could do B. That wasn't on the docket, but at least I could say that's done. So it's negotiation with yourself, a lot of forgiveness, keeping your eye on what you would like to have happen, having a space that has those motivational things around you so that you see what you'd like to accomplish and why, surrounding yourself with people who also have projects going on. So they are also pursuing things. You and I both, pop around bamboo. And that was a game changer for me because all of a sudden I was around all of these women who had all these big ideas. They had left institutions or corporations and they decided to do their own thing. And to watch these amazing, brilliant women, and there are men too, but I get you. To see that on a daily basis and to hear them being nervous, but doing it anyway, and seeing them dreaming ridiculously big and just going for it, it's motivating. So it's also who you surround yourself with, whether that's people who are also pursuing a dream or are also creative or also trying to learn to be a better public speaker. Those things are essential.
That's amazing. And I'll text you next time I'm up at 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. because it happens a
Please
lot.
do.
So amazing.
We should have just an open Zoom time. I'm
we
up.
should. Yes. A nice cocktail. Oh, hell yeah. I am in flow state. Amazing. Tara, you have been incredible and have provided oodles of great information so far. But as we wrap this up, what advice do you have for listeners?
The whole thing is a journey, and it's how we story our journey. And, we can't change facts sometimes, but you and I have talked about resumes a lot, for example, and, your resume says what it says, but it's how you story it. It's how you talk about what's on there and what those experiences have meant to you and for you. So I would just say, whatever you want to achieve, look at the way that you're storying it. And is that getting you in the direction that you want to go? Or could you story it in a way that's still factually true, but motivates you and inspires others who hear those stories, as opposed to, yeah, that's what happened. I messed up. I took those 3 years off. I think that would be it. Look, check the stories, check the narratives that you're saying about your journey. Make it an adventure story. Make it an inspiration story.
Full circle. Great way to close it out. So if you're listening to this and you want to work with Tara, which I highly recommend, she's incredible, head to the show notes and tune in again next week for another episode of That's Business.